So many property managers either plan to be acquired or plan to grow through acquisition, but very few property managers have more than like maybe one rep or two reps at either acquiring a company or being acquired. And that is why Stacey Salyer's expertise is so relevant to you. Not only did she acquire a property management company, not only was she acquired by a large property management company, she then went in-house for Pure to lead their acquisitions teams. So she has basically seen it all in acquisitions. And if you are a follower of this podcast, you understand that the last season of acquisitions, this last kind of like run up of like 2020 to 2023 was really, like fruitful for a lot of people. But we are now entering a new context. These companies have learned the cost of churn that comes with it, what mistakes to make, what not to make, what to look for. There's also a new class of investor, this entrepreneur through acquisition class out there. And Stacy, she's just kind of like been through it all. She's seeing what's happening. That's why they call her the queen of the chessboard. If you want to up your knowledge on what it takes to be acquired, how to acquire, all these kinds of different things for today's context, you need to listen to this episode with Stacey Salyer, who, by the way, I think this is like her third time on the podcast. She is officially the pole position for the golden jacket on the podcast right now. Enjoy this conversation with the queen of the chessboard, Stacey Salyer. Welcome to the Property Management Frame Breakers podcast. I'm your host, Pablo Gonzalez, and I am here to introduce you to the folks in the property management space that have broken the frame of what you may believe was possible. This podcast is presented by Vendoroo. It is your all-in-one AI solution for resolving your maintenance needs. Let's go. Stacy, you and I were having a back and forth, and you were talking about acquisitions and then all the other amazing things that you know how to do, and systemizing and building companies and doing this stuff. I'm like, Stacy, the more you talk about anything that isn't acquisitions, the more you sound like everybody else, because I think you have a unique experience, skill set in the acquisition game for property management companies.
Right.
What is that? Let's help our friend that just tuned into the third episode of Stacey Salyer on the Property Management Frame Breakers podcast go deep into your experience with acquisitions that's unlike anybody else.
Yes, I know. The Slayer. You got to bring the Slayer back. Third time is a charm. Okay, so yeah, and I think I sent you a voice memo saying thanks for calling me out and telling me that I'm boring, that I sounded boring, because I'm not boring because I'm the Slayer. But yeah, so basically the differentiator is, there are some amazing consultants out there, of course, that teach operations and how to build your business and do all the things, but there isn't anybody teaching people how to buy a property management company. And that is the question out there, right? So there's so many people out there I see on the internet all the time, like, oh, how do I buy a property management company? Or how do I even figure out the valuation of it? Or I got this deal that came across my desk. It's 50 doors. Is this a good deal? I'm like, and I look at that and I'm like, why are you asking Facebook? Like, that is not a good idea. So, but I do bring a lot of experience to it. So one, I did a large acquisition in my market at the beginning of COVID. Mm-hmm. So a little backstory on that. I had started talking to that seller. It was December 2019, but really like January 2020. We were going to close April 1st, 2020. But as we all know, the world kind of came to a big halt, like the middle of March. And both the seller and I were like, okay, well, let's just put a quick pause on it, make sure that, maybe that he still has income coming in and all that kind of good stuff from, rent. And we ended up closing June 1, 2020, which, I still think was a big move, because while we had gone 3 months into COVID, we really didn't know exactly what was going to happen. So there I was, about 370 doors. Now I would classify that as a boomer business, which brings me to one of the reasons I want to teach others how to buy businesses, is because there are, number one, generational wealth is, coming about, right? The big transfer. We're in the middle of that. And the boomers have got, regardless whether they sell it or their family sells it for them, that there's a lot of opportunity out there. However, with the boomer businesses, a lot of them are going to take a lot of extra work because what I've found, even in my market, when I did my purchase and then even nationwide, is a lot of our boomer friends, they set it up to be a job for them. They set it up, it was a job. They had their income coming in. They didn't really look at it as an asset of, oh, I'm going to build this business. I'm going to generate all this revenue. I'm going to step out of it. I'm going to have somebody else run it for me. For whatever reason, they didn't build them that way. Now, they are great in the fact that they're not necessarily very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But on the flip side, if you don't have your operations set up, to incorporate that and maybe some plans of like how to deal with the clients of like, hey, you're no longer going to like receive paper statements from me, or, residents, now you get to pay online, which actually the residents are usually are excited about that. But, you've got to be very strategic about how you do that. So
Yeah, you hear a lot about in these acquisition moves, this like elevated churn rate that happens. And that to me screams of fumbled change management and being able to like understand the change management so that when you're paying for an asset, you don't immediately overpay because you lost a bunch more of the revenue than you thought you was coming with you. That seems like really, really appropriate. Before we go into like that to me is like strategic pieces of it. You are somebody who grew a property management company. I'd like to say you famously grew a property management company as a single mother. And then you had in your property management company, you acquired another one, and then you had an exit. So you've been through both sides of an acquisition. And then you went in-house with Pure, leading national acquisitions across the country, running a team of former management entrepreneurs turned acquisition people. Like you were Tony Klein's boss and Paul, I forget Paul's last names.
Paul
Yeah.
Kankowski.
Paul Konkowski's boss. Like you were, like running this like floor of acquiring. You closed property management acquisition deals off of cold calls, right? So
Did.
like I wanna dive into all of it, right? Like I
Yeah.
think there's before we start seeing around corners, I think that there is some basic stuff that whoever puts a post on Facebook needs to hear about. Let's start with I want to acquire a property management company. How do I even approach other property management companies or find other property management companies to acquire?
Yeah. Well, number one, I mean, really, and I do go more in depth to this like in my course, and I'm going to be rolling out some really cool stuff in 2026. But the premise is you really want to treat it like you're a salesperson, right? So you've got to have number one, a CRM, and it may sound kind of like overkill, but if you're really, really serious about acquiring other businesses, whether it's in your market or you want to start going multi-market or, multi-state for sure, then you definitely need this. But I wouldn't even start with a Google sheet. Just start with a simple CRM and then just start contacting people. Let people know your intentions. So, because nobody's ever going to know that you want to buy something unless you actually put it out there. The other thing you can do is talk to your CPA, talk to area CPAs, let them know, hey, I'm looking at acquiring businesses, because 99% of the time they're going to know before anybody else who's looking to offload, right? Because they do their taxes, they have their annual meetings, and the boomers are coming in and they're like, oh, I'm getting really tired. And CPAs just got off a phone call with you. Oh, hey, I've actually got somebody I can make a warm intro, right? Super simple. Landlord tenant law attorneys, another great source. They're going to know who has reached the end of their rope. And they also may know who's reached the end of the rope before this prospective seller may even know, right? Because they see the stress and they hear the stress and they're like, okay, this guy, he's maybe needs to look at exiting before he loses everything. And that's the other thing too, right? So you don't want the people who have built up businesses to just kind of like lose what they had. So that's a pretty simple like start of it. And then just, building relationships in your community, letting people know like, hey, I'm looking to grow. Not only am I looking to grow, door by door, as we've all been taught, but I'm looking to grow by acquisition, and I would love the opportunity to build a relationship with you.
You said, this is moments like this is I'm like, all right, this is why Stacy and I became such quick friends because we think in similar ways. I'm not somebody, I've never cold called my way into anything, right? So that's not me, but I love to network and build relationships. And more than networking and building relationships, I love a strategic way of approaching relationships where every one relationship I'm trying to build is a potential for like 30 relationships that I'm actually looking for. And the idea of you're a property manager, it is so much easier to cold call 10 CPAs looking for the CPA that's worked with the most property managers because you're a property manager,
Mm-hmm.
and then build a relationship with them and then be like, hey, listen, what I'm really trying to do is find this, like I'm finding this and building those relationships. Or
Mm-hmm.
same thing with a landlord tenant attorney kind of thing, right? Like those people want to take your call and they are most likely to be able to, be what I call a watering hole, like a place where like you can go one to few and be sources of relationships. And the idea of being the person that once a month hosts a CPA and landlord attorney dinner, or once a
Right.
quarter host a CPA landlord attorney dinner, or if you want to get really Pablo about it, host the local CPA podcast in your town, right?
Right.
Like it is it's such a good way to do business development that feels like a great just nugget for anybody that's trying to acquire right now.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. And honestly, whether you're trying to acquire large quantity or even small quantity, because those CPAs, you're going to know both. They're going to
Yeah.
know the do-it-yourself landlord, and then they're going to know property management business owner. So, I mean, you can hit, is that two birds with one stone? Is that what that saying is? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Probably multiple birds. Although we don't talk about that in this household. We're birders in this household. So that be all right. So Stacy, so you find so this is I want to start acquiring. Where do
okay.
I find people to acquire? Boom, solved. That sounds super easy. Let's say a CPA comes to me and says, "Hey, funny enough, just got off the phone with old Billy Bob down the street. He's 68 years old and he's just kind of tired of it. He's got 150 doors. He's making a decent living, but like doesn't have anybody that's going to take it.
Mhm.
What's the outreach then to that property manager? How do you start that conversation strategically? How would you advise?
Well, I mean, I would ask for a warm intro. That's what I would ask for. I mean, if the CPA isn't down for that, then I would just pick up the phone and call that person. But that's how I found my deal. So I had looked at some others in my market, but this one actually came to fruition. And it was a landlord tenant law attorney. I just said, "Hey, I'm looking to grow." And he said, "Oh, okay. Have you ever thought about buying a company?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, of course. I mean, I'll take any meeting, right? Like, don't say no to the meetings, people." And that's how that went. He introed us, and I had my meeting, and we just kind of went down that road. So,
Got it. All right. So then let's go beyond that, right? So then that's just outreach. Talk to me about kind of like building the relationship with a business owner that is in pain and wants to sell. How do you navigate that relationship in a way that you're trying to get what you want out of it and show up in the right way and all that stuff?
yeah. So I guess it really just kind of goes into building relationships. And I approach everything like more in that deeper relationship building. I ask a lot of questions, but then I also listen a lot. I'm not the kind that's going to come at you really hard, which is probably why I have closed deals. And we're talking large door quantity, like a 900 plus deals from legit cold calls, because I am truly wanting to find out like what are your pain points? Like what is it that you're looking to do? Like what are your kind of life goals? I mean, I'm not not a therapist, but I mean, kind of taking it more the route of like, what is it that you want? And then I'm going to be able to know if we're going to align already, because I already know what I want.
Yeah.
So I don't really need to go through that, right? So I know what I want. I know what kind of vision I have, and does this match my vision or not? So
Yeah.
just kind of helping get inside that person's head. I mean, and then of course, down the road, like once you've signed your NDA, then you got to submit your like due diligence list of, hey, these are the things I need to take a look at so that I can take a look at the numbers, and then give you a letter of intent. And that's a very quick overview of how it goes,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we're gonna do 101 for right now.
yeah.
I have a buddy, my buddy Wally Conway. He's a guy. He had a job like yours in the home inspection industry, right? Like he sold to like a roll up, and then he was doing this, and he would just tell me he'd talk to get on the phone with folks and just like start the conversation with just kind of like, what do you want out of life, man? Like, what would you be doing if you weren't working? because if they don't have an idea for that, then they're gonna, like they got to have something that they want to be doing, or else the conversation around do I sell my business is more like mental masturbation, because if they don't see themselves doing anything else, they're just like, well, I'm gonna give me or whatever, right? Like, is that something that you experienced as well? Is there like kind of like go-to opening question that you have kind of thing to get the ball rolling the right way?
Actually, so I would do my own due diligence on the person before I called them.
Tell me more about that.
So, yeah, so I mean, I guess in my opinion, it's like sales 101, right? Like if you're gonna, like, I don't actually believe in cold calls, and I'm using air quotes if anybody's listening, just without watching. But a strategic cold call is actually me doing due diligence on you before I actually call you. So I'm going to know a little bit about your history based on what I'm finding on the internet and what you've shared. But I'm going to look at, your business, like length of years, do you have any hobbies? Do you have anything like I'm going to have kind of an in when I call you? And I mean, of course, the the natural in is that we both own property management companies or we're both involved in property management. So that's always an in. And I'm just going to take even like current world events. I mean, it really just kind of depended like who I was calling. So it's not, I didn't really have like a blanket. It was just more tailored to that particular person.
Yeah, super underrated to do some research on the person, find some common ground, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
to be
Yeah. And,
safe.
and common ground, of course, property management's really easy to find if you really don't know that anything about them. But people are more likely to keep talking to you if you know something about them because people love to talk about themselves.
Ain't that the truth?
It is.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So all right, so then you're finding out what they want, right? You said earlier you know what you want. What
Right.
is it? What do you look for? Like, is it just any old portfolio from a boomer? Is it, like, are there things to run away from? Are there things to run towards? What's the buyer box kind of like supposed to look like?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that there's necessarily anything to like run away from. It just depends on your threshold of like what you like pain wise of what you want or don't want. And again, it kind of goes back to that initial strategy of like how are you like what do you want to incorporate into your business? Because some people thought I was a little bit insane for buying the business I did because I was like high tech, high touch, zero paper, mostly global talent. And then I bought a business that was, the owner was the property manager. He had one bookkeeper and that was it. They did everything paper. Nobody could pay online. Their platform wasn't even in the cloud. I mean, so we're talking like polar opposite. But anyway, sorry, I lost my train of thought. You guys can edit
Nah,
it
we're
out.
talking about like what do you run away from and what do you run toward?
Oh, yeah.
What's the buy box?
Yeah. So the buy box is whatever you set it at.
Yeah.
And so you just have to know ahead of time, like what your buy box is. So I can't really tell you like, oh, this would be your buy box because you have to determine what that buy box would be. But if I was looking today, so like, let's say I wanted to go buy a business today because I don't currently own a PMC. Given my experience, I would go buy a boomer business for me personally, because I know based on my experience what I could do to turn that around and I could I could turn around the revenue. And I also know that I could put somebody in place to run it for me. I wouldn't have to jump in and be the property manager. But I also know like all the different industry tools. And I know based on my experience, again, what would work really well with that type of clientele and the type of resident. So you just kind of have to know your own buy box, but there are some red flags and certain things that you need to know so that you're not overpaying. So I think that's kind of more the question is like, what do you need to know so you don't overpay for something? Number one, you've got to look at your client like door mix. So a lot of times when people bring on like big investor clients, they're like, yay, I'm winning. This one investor owns 75 doors and I manage 100. And you're like, yeah, your company's like not really worth anything because like that one client walks and now you have 25 doors. So you don't really have a business. That is something that's a, red flag or a caution flag. What else?
So if you're looking to buy a property management company, somebody has a large part of that portfolio, you got to be really cognizant of the fact that like you have a big risk. They probably have a great, they probably have a long-standing relationship, a whole bunch of trust. You would that be something where maybe there's an opportunity there to be like, all right, well, I'll only buy this if I can meet this investor and like get a feel for where they're at? Or is that something that's out of bounds to ask if you're in one of these like due diligence processes?
No, I don't think it's out of bounds. I don't think there's really technically a right or wrong. I think it really, everything, it's kind of like real estate sales, right? Like
Yeah.
every transaction is the same, but everyone is different because
Mm,
they're all individually owned. The client mix is all different, the
yeah.
resident mix, the house mix, and all that. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, depending on the client. I mean, so again, if that client would be scared off, then it would be probably a bad thing for that business owner to do that. And
Sure.
so there's, I don't know.
So maybe it's a red flag if they say, no, I can't introduce you to them, right? Like,
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
feels
I
like a
mean
good
that
question.
could be a red flag. And also depending on, I mean, the key really is like how much help are you going to have from the seller to transition? So
Mhm.
again, if you're buying a business, like let's say the seller unfortunately like passed away and now it's like a fire sale,
Mhm.
you're probably going to have a ton of
Churn.
churn. Thank you. You're going to have a ton of churn with that
Yeah.
versus, if you're able to pick it up while the person is still able to help you transition
That
that
makes sense. That makes
buyer.
sense. You
So,
just said something. Depends on how much the seller will help you transition.
Something really interesting to talk about here that I've been talking about with Stacy when it comes to acquisitions is that when you acquire another property management company, you're kind of like taking on their maintenance operation and their leasing operation and their books, right? So like if you want to de-risk an acquisition, you need a way to like understand how those things work as well as possible. The old way of doing it is called due diligence. It's just like pouring over all this stuff. At Vendoroo, we've created an agent that we actually had to develop it for onboarding, right? But basically, we can plug an agent into someone's PMS and go over the last 2 to 3 years of maintenance operations in the PMS, and the agent will tell you what their maintenance operations look like. It's like, cool, you have all these SOPs, you have all these different things. This is what you have actually been doing. And what I want you to take away from that is that if you are looking to acquire a company, yeah, like talk to us, right? Like we're putting together this package of de-risking acquisitions. We're partnering with Stacy to do this, using this agent to like understand exactly what you're getting into, and a couple of other partners for the books and the leasing side. But, if you're listening to this and not thinking about an acquisition, all you're thinking about is how do they even onboard my company? How could they possibly is it so much work for me to get Vendoroo in that I would have to teach them everything that I do and it would take forever? No, we've made onboarding really, really easy by creating this agent. If you want to try Vendoroo, it has never been easier to try this right now, and it has never been more certain that we can get you to an 85-95% level of maintenance automation with way less effort than it used to take. So give Vendoroo a try. Vendoroo.ai, schedule a demo, let them know you're listening to this podcast. Hope to see you on the inside of the AI revolution, my friend. Back to Stacy.
And my head goes to the idea that most people I know sell their business and can't wait to get the hell out of there. And I've seen over and over again a moment where they have all the best intentions of helping people transition, but it, for whatever reason, seems to happen prematurely, or less gusto than you were expecting, when all of a sudden this person that hasn't had a boss has a boss, and they don't really want to do it the way you want to do it. What are conversations one can have, or things that one can set up to mitigate for the idea of not being underwhelmed by the amount of help you're going to get on that transition piece?
yeah, I think it's really important to outline it very, very specifically. And you want to have it outlined, in my opinion, in the purchase agreement, but I'd probably even do a separate agreement between the seller and the company as far as the expectations and what that looks like. Are they going to be paid extra? Or are they not? Maybe dial it down to how many hours per week, what the conversation should look like. Now, the caveat to that is if it is a seller financed deal, I find that the sellers tend to be more in tune with helping transition because of that clawback period.
Mm-hmm.
Clawback periods are usually relatively tight, like 6 months is the general clawback period.
Can you explain what a clawback period is? Asking for a friend.
Yeah. So clawback period is a time frame. Let's say I buy your company, you're at 300 doors. You and I agree, each door is worth let's say, for easy math, $1,000. And then in 6 months, we're going to evaluate how many doors are left. So if we lost, X amount of doors, then you would lose, 1,000 times per door that we lost. Usually it's not a forward clawback. So that wouldn't really be a clawback, but a lot of times when people are selling, they're like, yeah, but what if you add doors? I want to be paid on those. And usually, I would say no, but I guess you could negotiate anything you want. Anyway, so that you look at that. And if it's seller finance, they're usually more apt to help on that time frame. But 6 months is not really that long though either. So a lot of times when you're putting together something, you think, oh, 6 months is plenty of time. That's easy, but that's actually not really the case. And again, kind of going with to mitigate churn, you don't want to just, go in like guns a-blazing and be like, okay, I'm here and, I'm going to up your fee and I'm going to do this and that. And that would also be a bad idea.
Got it. So what I'm hearing is if you really want to think through the time period and the consequence around the clawback period, and the longer that you can extend it, the better, so that you can roll out your changes in a non-shocking manner to the residents and to the owners. And also because you want this old owner involved and like invested in it, right? So it's like, I'm hearing from you this idea of owner financing actually being a good thing that ties you together and incentivizes them via carrot versus a contract that says, if this doesn't happen, I'm going to sue you for something, because that's going to be a pain in the ass for you anyways. Right. So that feels like a stick. So it's almost like best practices, if I'm reverse engineering your experiences, is have like a 1 to 2 year clawback period where they can stand to gain a lot by there not being much churn. That feels almost kind of like a perfect kind of like scenario as a buyer, feeling like I'm going to get the effort that I want from this person.
Well, I would say if you were able to negotiate a 1 or 2 year clawback, you should be like, for sure,
Okay.
the number one salesperson. Because the traditional, not that there's a standard, in anything sales related, but usually it's like 6 months. Okay. 12 would be really, really long. So 6 is usually kind of the standard.
Is it things that were you all trying 12 and you just couldn't get it? Or is it just kind of like one of these things like 1 year leases is the thing, but you could go out there and get a 2-3 year lease?
No, I haven't really ever seen 12. I've helped a couple clients with actually selling their company, and they wanted a 12-month, but the buyer didn't really want a 12-month. So it just kind of depends on, how much does the buyer really want your business? So it's just that negotiation piece of it. Yeah.
Okay. So I feel like that's a good, like I would think like there's a kind of like when you're investing in real estate, you buy the property once, but then you manage it forever, right? Like, so the transactional piece is kind of like how you get the buyer to sell to you, the deal that you cut. Seems to me that the real magic here is in the change management and the prevention of churn on the back end. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So ultimately, you really need to be a good relationship builder. And so now you as the buyer, if you're not, if in your heart of hearts, you are not the one that's going to be making phone calls and, listening to maybe somebody rant on about, for 30 minutes about their family or how it was their family home and whatever, then make sure you have somebody on your team that can do that. And make sure you have really clear plans in place before it's closing day. So that is something I help clients with, is mapping out, like, let's take a look at your current operations. So maybe right now you manage 200 doors and your current ops runs on 200 doors. But what would happen tomorrow if you dumped 200 more? Like, what would break? So let's look at what breaks first, like before you even do that, and then map out a clear plan of like who's going to be helping you in the whole transition period. So it shouldn't just fall on the owner or the buyer. You should be talking to your entire team. You need to be strategic about everything. Maybe you have just one designated person that's like the relationship builder, but don't forget the residents as well, because the residents, in my opinion, can also help make or break your business in your community and are still play a really important piece in that.
I could see myself being a property management business owner that all of a sudden got this like opportunity to go buy another business company and not think through this until like I'm like signing day, right? Like the idea of, all right, if we're going to do this, will my technological infrastructure hold up? What needs to change in order to do that? Does my personnel hold up? What needs to
Right.
change in order to do that? And then C, when you are in transition, you're gonna stress the system at its max, right? Like
Mhm.
you're gonna have like the full-time job of like managing all these doors, plus there's a whole nother role that is the change management aspect piece of it, and how you staff up for that. Does one staff up for that like temporarily to like do that, or does one bring a consultant that handles that? Like what is that in between period org chart look like with the change management piece?
Well, I think it depends for each, person or each buyer, each
Okay.
company. And again, I guess in the industry, I've seen a lot more of like it's just kind of happened by, I don't want to say accident, because obviously they knew it was coming, but I don't think a lot of people talk about that part of it. A lot of people talk a lot about like, oh, how much is my company worth? Or is that, all that thing, but like they don't really think about the after effects. So that's something that I'll be helping. Number one, I can help people do that, and
Yeah.
that will be part of my services. And number two, teaching people just long term of, how do you do that? Do you, hire a specific, customer service remote team member? How do you do that? But you want to make sure that you are really building those new relationships with the new clients from day one, and that they
Yep.
feel welcomed, and that you're not overwhelming them with things that they maybe haven't experienced before. Because that is something that I didn't actually really clue into until I was like doing it when I bought that business in 2020, is
Mhm.
I assumed, and again, I probably shouldn't have assumed because we all know what happens with that word. I just thought, oh, I have this beautiful business and we are so cool. And everybody, all my current people love me, right? And they love how I run everything. And I've got all these cool programs. And, you get emails and you get, your owner statement through your email portal and you have all this stuff. And there were some clients that were like, yeah, no, like I want my paper. Could you please mail it to me? I'm
Yeah.
like, they didn't really like the change. So I think that's the biggest piece is when you are the business owner instituting the change, you have to remember that maybe you love change, but the majority of humans do not love change. And so really mapping out, okay, like we can't fire hose them with all the change. We got to gradually put it in, build a relationship, build that rapport, and hopefully the seller is by your side also building that, even though they didn't run it that way. They're, still like reiterating, like, yeah, no, this is a great move. You're gonna love it.
Stacy, I turn like a lot of these podcasts into newsletters, and I'm like already, to me, I'm like thinking, all right, what's the takeaways from this podcast, right? Like, it's how do you find a property management to buy? Easy. Go like talk to CPAs, go talk to landlord attorneys. Then it's how do you, kind of like approach the person. It's all about figuring out what they want out of things and building that relationship, doing your due diligence on them, building that rapport, knowing what you want. But like the most valuable piece I get out of this is like this is the seeing around the corner when you hire a professional like yourself that's done this, the having a very clear map for what is the like who is going to own change management,
Right.
right? What is going to be the cadence of change that you want to impose upon your owners and your residents? And what will my organization need to look like from a technological standpoint and from a personnel standpoint to handle these things? Seems like a big bunch of value that anybody listening would have just gotten if they're thinking about doing this, right?
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think that, again, drawing from my own personal experience, local and then national, I mean,
Mhm.
every single one is different.
Yeah.
Again, I can't impress upon that enough. And, I did certain things like I hired an in-person assistant, property manager who thankfully, again, I was very strategic about hiring this particular person. She was able to straddle both businesses because I ran two property management companies differently for quite some time because it took a while to move over, all the doors that I had purchased. And she was able to do that. And so, not only are you having to, work with like new clients, you've got your existing clients, you've got your team as well. And, you may be very excited about this, right? Because you're like, oh, I'm the owner and I'm going to make all this more money and things are going to be great. And I'm going to be like number one in my market, but you can't forget about your team as well. And that is really important. So when you're strategizing, that your team is almost the most important piece of the puzzle as well.
Yeah, makes sense. You just mentioned something I hadn't thought about, that you can acquire locally or you can acquire nationally. What do you need to think through for that, right? Like I immediately was just like, no, I'm just gonna acquire the property management down the street. I didn't think like, well, I'm in Birmingham, Alabama. Why don't I acquire something in, I don't know, Chattanooga, Tennessee? Like, is that even possible to do these days? Is it easier to do these days? Do you recommend that versus the other? Can you talk me through this local versus not local?
Yeah. Well, I think again, it just depends on like, you've got to really like deep dive into your inner self and like figure out number one, what you really want. What do you really want with your life?
Yeah.
Why do you want to grow the way you want to grow?
Yeah.
If you want to grow just local, why do you want to do that? If you want to grow multi-state, why do you really want to do that? If it's
Why would somebody want to grow multi-state as opposed to just like more in their own market?
I think, well, I mean, number one, I mean, you in theory could make more money. I mean, you could, create kind of more of a national brand. You could do things where you're like, I want to franchise one day. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons. I mean,
Yeah. Maybe your
one,
market is Phoenix, and market like Phoenix seems to be like really, really struggling right now versus like Mobile, Alabama is probably a faster, or Birmingham or whatever, right? Cash flow markets. Yeah. Okay.
right. Yeah. I mean, the West Coast people are probably like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, if one more regulation comes down, I'm going to like
Okay.
my hair on fire. So there's, yeah, a variety,
Yeah.
of reasons. But, really figure out your why before you do anything.
Mhm.
And then I wouldn't really say any of it's technically easy. I think it just depends on what your threshold of pain is. But if you're going to buy outside of your market, then you really need to make sure that you understand the market you're buying in. So you don't want to buy, like if somebody from South Carolina was like, oh, I'm going to buy something in Washington State, and they had no idea like the regulation, like what a lease should look like like how much things cost, that would be a bad idea. So you really need to have a really good idea of like that market, landlord tenant law, like what is that going to look like? If you plan on running remote, will the people in that market actually like that? Because again, you're talking like a bunch of smaller communities. They like brick and mortar. They may still be kind of like, good old boys town and like, who's that newcomer? Like, why would I use their business? Because they don't even live here, or whatever the case may be. So you got to be pretty strategic about that as well. But I mean, it goes down to even just simple stuff. Like if you're going to buy in a different state and you haven't ever managed in that state, you need to make sure you've got a property management agreement that actually works in that market, a lease that works in that market, pricing that works in that market. Look at the reputation of the person that you are purchasing. Do they have a good reputation? If they don't, that's also a really, really big red flag.
Yeah. I'm hearing understand the legal side of it, which is essentially like what you need to have in your documents in order to be in compliance, and what kind of like things you need to have there. I'm hearing the pricing side of it, right? So I would assume that that is somewhere, that's like price of homes, rents, and kind of like the metrics around kind of like the performance of the market. Also, I would imagine there's the pricing side of it of like, what does a handyman cost? What does a plumber cost, right? Like what is the contractor base there and the vendor base there? Seems important. And then you're double tapping into more like, what is the culture of the customer base as well? And will they like somebody from Columbia, South Carolina in Spokane, Washington, or not? Or the other way around, right? Like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then beyond that, all the due diligence stuff of like, know your clients and whatever, right? So like but yeah, and then the team and how that culture fits. Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What do you think is what's most different today than when you were buying something in 2020? Or like, like I feel like property management has just been in such a rapid rate of change that I would have to assume that there has to be new nuances that have popped up that you probably have a better perspective of. having done so much of it during your peer days and your own days in the earlier 2020s, and now your pulse on the market? What do you think is different today than the last round of roll-ups that all seem to have happened in the last 5 years?
I think more people are actually more interested in it, and it's kind of become the thing. Besides AI, I think it's the next big thing in property management for sure. I would say we'll continue to see way more consolidations, whether it's just like local or, national, and not necessarily consolidations by just the big players, but I think just a variety of people. I think more people are open, I think, to the conversation about selling their property management companies. And again, with the boomer group aging out, and maybe even some of the older Gen X are like, I kind of want to be done. And, I built this as an asset and I want to be done. Because there are still good companies out there to buy too. I mean, you don't have to necessarily buy a boomer business. I mean, you could, maybe an older Gen X. It's like, I want to move on and no longer do this. I think that's probably the biggest change. And then with AI coming on board, we're going to see a rapid change. I mean, as you know, even next year at this time, property management won't look the same. So I think 2, 3, 4 years out, those that are on the bus of like, okay, I'm willing to take a look at the org chart and completely like blow it up and change it. I'm willing to incorporate, AI where I can. I'm willing to do this and that. Those are the ones that are going to keep rising to the top and just be able to pick up people that get tired of it. Honestly, I think that we're going to see a lot of people just get tired and just be like, okay, I'm done. I don't want to like keep trying to like keep up. I just want to, be done. So, yeah.
When it comes to the AI piece, I just I want to pressure test this with you, right? Like I see it a couple of ways. One is, from my purview and what I see, right? Like I think the one person maintenance team is very, very real as long as you have a good vendor network, right? Like AI will allow you to, manage a whole bunch of maintenance requests and like all these different issues as long as you have a good vendor network and you have your stuff going on. So I see that if you get real sharp with it in the acquisition game, you're going to be able to drive a whole bunch more profitability at a larger operation size.
Yep.
I also think when it comes to acquisitions and AI, the due diligence part is going to get greatly mitigated. Like, for example, I don't know if we showed you this at Florida State NARPM, but Nick has already created an agent that allows us, when onboarding, to run the agent inside of our new customer's property management system and go through 2 years of history and maintenance and tell our new customer what their actual policies that they live and do are in maintenance, right? So this idea of being able to like you might have something written, but here's like what you do, right? I
Right.
feel like on the due diligence side, for maintenance, for leasing, for all these different things, there are going to be agents that are able to like go in and do some way better due diligence than we were ever able to do at a much faster rate with a much higher kind of like risk of certainty that then also will feed your ability to manage it and run it with AI later. And I think that that's going to be pretty profound in the acquisitions game if I'm getting that correctly.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. It sounds like it. And I think, that's one of the reasons I've been working really hard on creating my relationships with my amazing vendor partners. And because that's, I want to be like the hub, right? Like the one that's like well connected. Like, okay, let's talk about your specific goals, like, kind of back it up. And then here, like almost create like a business in a box of like, okay, so like, let's say you already own a property management company and you want to add doors by acquisition. Here's your business in a box. Here's some resources of like that. Let's use that AI agent for the maintenance piece of it when we're doing due diligence and like whatever else is out there. And then another business in the box for the investor who maybe doesn't own a PMC yet, but they really want to. Maybe they already have their own portfolio. They've got 50 doors, whatever. They're like, oh, now I want to add in third party because I see where I can do revenue. I can incorporate all these things and then have a business in the box for them and say, hey, these are some amazing vendor partners I put together. I know they can get you, like they can manage like this number here, and then they're going to get you here, right? So have all these kind of things built out. That's my
Yeah.
ultimate goal.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. I think
Yeah.
that's super close, and I love the idea of you really just owning this one vertical. Like you wanna grow through acquisitions, call Stacy. You want to go buy one to be an entrepreneur through acquisition, call Stacy for property management, right? Like this whole like that's another thing that's changed for me, right? Like when you're talking about like the supply and the demand, there's an elevated level of supply and there's an elevated level of demand out there for it, right? Like these boomer businesses are all coming online, that offline actually, that
Right.
that that will want to be sold, and there's a wave of interest of people buying these home services businesses and entrepreneur through acquisition that is beyond what like the roll-ups were doing 5 6 years ago, because of the Cody Sanchez's of the world and like the different influencers that are out there teaching acquisition and stuff like that. So it feels like I love your position in the market based on your strategic advantage and like what you can do and your point of view around technology and scale and stuff like that. I just think it's awesome.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I mean, I think this is I don't know. I feel like every time I start a new business, it's like just at the right time with the tech piece. And I mean, obviously I planned that.
Yeah.
I didn't really, but I'm really excited. I'm really excited for people who want to, build their businesses, because there's opportunity for everybody, and no matter what you want to do, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. And the biggest thing, I guess, for me too, is like whoever is buying the businesses, they have such an awesome opportunity to then create a beautiful asset to where they can take that and then make it into something even bigger and better for them, their family, their community, their clients, their residents. And if anything, I think we're going to up our game in property management over the next 5 to 10 years. I think what we even, we've come a long way, since even when I got into it, but in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be even bigger and better. And it's just, I'm really excited to see what happens.
I'm excited that this was the official place where you launched this whole POV and everything.
Yes, I
I don't know if it's the
know.
official. I just know that I know that we've been talking a lot about it. I wanted to get the message out there. I think it's great.
It is official. Yeah. So I always appreciate you. You're awesome. And our property management community is very lucky that you are part of it.
Oh, thank you, Stacy.
You
As you know, I
are,
appreciate you, and that's why you're the only 3-time property management frame breakers guest so far.
I love it. I
Oh,
know. I love to be number one. So I'm like, I'm the winner.
you are the winner. You're the winner.